Good afternoon, everybody who's on the webinar and if you're listening on the podcast as well. I'm Paul Church. I'm Managing Director of Interquest. We're a tech data and digital recruitment business. And this is our people, culture and tech community /webinar/podcast. I think we've done about somewhere around 40 of these now, around about 16, 17 of them, which have been as a podcast as well. And the idea really is to talk all things which relate to business, company, culture, values, and they typically go into areas such as mental health, mental well-being, diversity, inclusion. And the idea is hopefully we can all come away from these meetings and these chats with a little something to make our businesses just a little bit better. And on this week, it's of course Mental Health Awareness Week. So it's very relevant that this week we're talking about how to make mental well-being or mental wellness a priority in your business and how to do so. And I think after the 14 months or so we've all had, that's never been more important. And certainly one of the good things to come out of this tough period is that it's certainly a conversation at a high level in the boardrooms now, and rightfully so. The well-being of the workforce is so important. So to the audience who are here today, as always, to those who are here every week, and thank you for those who keep turning up, please feel free to ask a question throughout. Just pop your hand up if you'd like to get involved. If you'd like to just put the question in the chat, I'm happy to ask one of our speakers as well. But let's go to our speakers. So I'm just going to start off with you, Lauren. So Lauren, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm really pleased to be speaking about this topic. It's definitely one of the ones that's close to my heart.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, look, it'd be great if you could just start off with just telling us a bit about your background, who you are, what you're doing now, and why this topic's so close to your heart.
Yeah, of course. So hi everyone, thanks for having me on. I have been working in the people and talent space for almost 10 years now. I started in recruitment, so my job was very much focused at how do you attract great talent into your companies. And then over the last couple of years, it's kind of changed focus. And now I look more at, once we've got that talent in, how do we make sure that our people are happy, that they're looked after, and how do we ensure that they can thrive in the business? So it's very much that employee experience, that well-being and that culture piece, which obviously, as Paul mentioned, is front and centre these days, just given everything over the last year. So the reason this has been something that I'm quite passionate about is because I think I've probably been on both sides of the extremes here. So I worked in a job that was, long hours, high stress, very KPI'd, very kind of sales culture, I think is the best way to put it. And don't get me wrong, it was a great job. But I think that when I compare that to other places that I've worked, where they've been a lot more about work-life balance, personal growth, well-being, etc., I can definitely see that if you have those aspects as something that your company looks after and that you can enjoy as an employee, I definitely think that companies get more out of their staff and that people are happier and more productive at work. So that's the reason that I think it's very important.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Lauren. Alicia, hello, welcome, and how are you?
Hello, very well, thank you. Also, thank you very much for having me, and really excited to be talking about this. It's so important.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much. Well, look, same question to you. Just kind of if you give us a bit about your background, a bit about kind of also the new role you've moved into, and then why this topic's so important to you as well.
Yeah, so my career started a bit differently. I actually used to teach English as a foreign language, did that for 5 years. And I used to work with people from all over the world and all adults. And I used to, they used to come to Oxford to teach them there. And I used to support them with all kinds of stuff, helping them, find houses and helping them find jobs. And I really enjoyed that element, as well as teaching them English. And like Lauren, I ended up going from that into recruitment. And that was kind of my move into the people side, into the career that I have now. And I've worked in people in recruitment for the last 8 years. And my recent role at Arbor Education was where I was really able to get stuck into wellbeing and what that means and how we can support people in the workplace with this. And I really enjoyed that. And, I'm hoping to be able to share a lot of that today. And at the moment, I'm currently working for a company called VouchedFor, heading up their talent. I joined last week, so still onboarding and learning a lot, but really hoping to also have an impact there when it comes to wellbeing and what we can do as well.
Well, thanks so much, even more so on week 2 of a new job, for being a part of today's hours chat. So thank you very much. But look, let's start off, I suppose, Alicia. And I'll go back to you actually. If we could maybe define well-being, because there's there's lots of terms: mental health, mental well-being, mental wellness. So if we could just define mental well-being, what it means, what we mean by it, how it fits in and differs to conversations around mental health, perhaps.
Yeah, so well-being, I think a lot of people, from what I've seen in the past, people tend to think of mental health and well-being as being the same thing, but actually they're very different. Well-being has lots of different factors and areas of your life that you can look at. So well-being generally is your kind of state of happiness, and how you are in yourself, your health as well. And the different areas that you can look at are things like your financial well-being, social well-being, intellectual well-being, and mental well-being as well, and physical well-being. So there are lots of different areas when it comes to that kind of one heading. And all these areas can impact your overall mental health. So I think it's really important to just remember that as an organization. And when you're thinking about, rolling out initiatives related to well-being or mental health, just remembering that it's all encompassing. It's not just all about the mental side of things.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that at all, just in terms of that definition and that description?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Alicia said. I think that mental health is great, and it's so worthwhile that that's a focal point these days. But I think very much it's all connected, and well-being's more about looking at this holistic view of a person. If somebody has good mental health, but they're not getting much sleep, or they're not eating right, or they've got a lot of financial stress, that's ultimately going to impact their emotional climate. So I think it's just getting that balance of factors and making sure that you can look after staff in all these different ways.
Absolutely. And I think, absolutely agree with that. And Alicia, I think I absolutely agree with, I like that we're defining well-being as happiness. I think that's a much clearer way to look at it, and a nice way to look at it as well. So Lauren, well-being is, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's probably never been as much at the forefront of the boardroom's agenda than it is right now. And that's a great thing. I mean, it's been brought on by the stresses we've all faced. And there's also a lot of empathy, because a lot of us have been facing similar stresses to each other. But how do businesses make sure they get these conversations right? Now it is a topic in a business. How do we make sure we get it right?
Yeah, I think it's something that a lot of businesses want to do and want to do more of, but in a lot of cases they just don't know where to start, and they're maybe so worried that they start and they say the wrong thing, or they do the wrong thing, and there's that fear factor of handling conversations incorrectly. I would say you have to start by listening to your staff or your workforce. Well-being, mental health, these things absolutely should be part of your business strategy, but the reason for that and how that looks for each company should be quite unique and should be very much employee-led. So I think to start these conversations, go out, speak to your people, do your engagement surveys, run your focus groups, and start to scope out what well-being feels like for your company. And once you've got that kind of baseline idea of what people are looking for, that's when you can start to build and implement.
Well, what would be the first step, do you think? Would you think it would be a survey? Do you think it would be one-to-ones? What would you do?
I would usually start with looking at staff surveys. I think are a really good way to find out where people are with it just now and where they want to get to. Also looking at your business statistics. So what is your attrition rate like? What are your sickness and absence rates like? Especially looking at things like long-term absence or repeat absences. And usually that can be a good indicator to mental health, stress, work-related kind of stress. And then start to see where these problem areas are and what you can do to tackle that. So I think you definitely have to do a bit of a discovery phase first, just to make sure that whatever you do move forwards with is kind of tailored and it is meeting a business need.
Absolutely. What do you think, Alicia?
Yeah, I would agree with Lauren. Getting feedback from people and listening to what people are saying is incredibly important. People will have different experiences. No one experience is the same, and it's really important to remember that. I also think that the people who are leading on initiatives around well-being or mental health initiatives should go on some kind of training or course to support them, because the type of language you use is really important as well. And we did that when we at Arbor when we started looking at this, and it really helped raise our own awareness and understanding. And I sent members of the leadership team on that training as well, and it was incredibly useful. And we kind of use that to help raise awareness, not just in ourselves, but across the organisation as well. And that was kind of our starting point, was we need to learn and understand, you know, what it means and what we're doing, and then sharing that with the organisation, and then getting feedback and listening to people from that point.
And what sort of training modules are they called, or what sort of things do you recommend to businesses?
Yeah, we use two. They're both mental health orientated. However, the first one we used Mind looked at other areas of well-being as well, just as general factors that can contribute towards your mental health. So we used Mind, 1-day workshop, mental health in the workplace. It was absolutely brilliant, really useful and insightful, and we learned so much from that. And one of the things they spoke about was that, you know, like physical health, everybody has mental health. Mental health isn't just like one thing. So it's just remembering that, and remembering that, you know, you have to do things to look after your mental health, and that also involves looking after your well-being and the different areas with that. So that was really useful and insightful. The other one that we use was Mental Health First Aid England, which a lot of people use to get qualified. I've heard really good things about that. I haven't been on it myself, but yeah, heard good things.
Was there anything on those courses, perhaps particularly the Mind one, where maybe you thought things were one way, or things should be said one way, and actually it turned out to be something completely different, that you'd not thought about it like that before? Was there anything else that stood out from that course at all?
I think the physical health one obviously was a big one. You know, they were like, if you break your leg, for example, you damage yourself physically, you tell people and you take time out. You look after yourself and do some physio, and, you know, and we also do things to look after our physical health in general. You know, we go for a run, or we go for a walk outside. So it's just, you know, transferring that to your mental health and thinking, what do you do to look after your mental health? You know, how do you look after your mental well-being, your social well-being? You know, what are the factors that can contribute towards that? And it's encouraging people to talk about it in a more like normal context as well, not just thinking mental health is a bad thing. So that was really useful and insightful. And what I also found really useful was the language that they went over, that, you know, no one's state of well-being is ongoing. It's, you know, the way you feel in your well-being is a present state. It doesn't mean you always feel like that. You know, you could feel very differently the next day. So one day you could be feeling socially quite anxious, or, you know, a bit low, as, you know, I'm sure lots of people suffered with this during lockdown as well. But it could be that the next day you're fine. And it's just kind of remembering that, and listening to people again, and supporting people, and making sure that you have the right tools and resources in your organizations, where when people are not having a good time in different areas of their well-being, that they've got resources that they can go to, or people that they can talk to about that should they need it, for example.
So that absolutely makes sense. And we've got Ken has just put in the chat, the mental health first aid course is really good, absolutely recommended. So absolutely. I've had a couple of questions come through in the private chat, actually, so I'm just going to go to those. So I'll go to you first on this one, Lauren. So who do you think the onus should be on for creating a work environment for being for good mental well-being? The board, senior managers, or everyone? So Lauren, if I could ask you that one first of all.
Sure. So definitely everyone. I think that often these wellbeing initiatives can be very employee-led, which is wonderful that people want to get involved and they want to be proactive, but ultimately you need that senior leadership, you need that boardroom component as well. And if anything, I think if your senior leaders aren't advocates and they don't truly believe how beneficial these practices can be, you're always going to have a bit of a blocker there. People aren't going to feel 100% comfortable. And I think something that's come out of the pandemic is actually people in these senior leadership or management positions are just as likely, if not more so, to struggle with their well-being, because, you know, they might have more responsibility, more staff pressure, more work pressure. And if that conversation isn't opened up at that level, not only can that not make everybody under them feel comfortable, but you're doing them a disservice as well, because they might actually really need some support.
100% agree with that. Alicia, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely should be led by everyone. You know, you want it to be embedded in your culture, and you need to think about that when you're implementing policies or procedures. You know, how are you embedding well-being in what you're doing? You know, when you're organizing socials, or when you're looking at different benefits that you can offer staff and organizations that you work with. But the one thing I'd like to add is when it comes to the senior leadership team, one thing that's really important is that they display the behaviours that support positive well-being. So, I've seen some SLT members, slacking people at 10 p.m. and making people feel really stressed and anxious about things, or socials being organised really late on a Friday, so parents who are looking after children can't participate. It's little things like that you need to think about and communicate really well on. So yeah, just food for thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me as well, I think one thing, and this has been a theme in some of these webinars we've seen, is that displaying vulnerability as a manager on the leadership team is a strength, and that's it's a trait which will go down well in your business and will create that kind of safe environment. I absolutely always thought that I must never display vulnerability as manager. And last year was probably the first time I'd actually done it, and I talked about myself using our EAP, and then that filters down and people feel more comfortable talking about it. So for me, it absolutely starts at the top. Everyone's responsible for everyone, but I think if the top don't display it, then it's not going to filter down at all as well. Another question in the private chat. So we'll go to you, Alicia, on this one. What is the best way to approach absence from work as a manager? I've had previous instances where people have taken time off, but not wanted to talk about their reasons for this. And obviously, as a manager, you don't want to try or probe too much. What is the best way to approach this when you feel it may be caused by mental health rather than physical health? Good question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, ultimately, you can't force someone to disclose information that they may not want to. One thing that, if their absence is very high to the point where it's impacting their work, then you need to look at your absence processes, and how you address that as an organization. If somebody is absent because they're suffering from adverse, mental health, you need to look at what support you can offer that person. So as an organization, you should have look into things like an EAP program, employee assistance program, which they can be absolutely brilliant. They're not expensive either to implement, and you can get some which offer free counselling, either over the phone or face to face, obviously post COVID. They also do blogs and webinars and worksheets to help support people's well-being. Mind have an excellent wellness action plans document that I've used before with somebody, and it's really well structured and guided in supporting someone's well-being and mental health in how they manage their work and day-to-day circumstances. So that's the first thing. If you don't have resources or tools that you can use to support them, you should be talking to your people team or leadership team to look at implementing something. But in a longer case where you've tried everything and it's still not working and somebody is still taking long-term absence, then you'll have to follow your processes for long-term absence, and in some cases you can also get them to talk to their doctor and get a diagnosis from their doctor depending on how long they've been off for, and get support, information that way of what you can do to help them, doing a risk assessment or occupational health assessment. What can you do?
Fantastic, thank you. And Lauren, anything to add to that at all?
Yeah, I agree with Alicia. I think the employee assistance programs, I really do think they're the hidden gem for giving people a way to access professional counselling. Ours has 8 free professional counselling sessions. It's got a live chat option for staff that maybe don't want that face-to-face contact yet. But equally, I think having a really strong return to work procedure can really help. So again, if someone went off, with a physical illness, you would have them in the office. You say, how are you feeling now? Are you fitting well to be back here? Is there any adjustments we can make so that you feel more comfortable? And is there any support that we can give you? So making sure that you're having those exact same conversations for someone where it is maybe a mental illness, and also thinking about things like having that conversation somewhere really private. So don't do it, in a glass door meeting room. Don't do it in a breakout area. Do it somewhere where if they're going to perhaps disclose more information, they can do so comfortably. And again, I would always recommend doing these towards the end of the day, so that if someone does maybe become a bit emotional or whatever, they're not having to go right back into work afterwards. So just taking small kind of practical measures to make sure you can have these conversations.
Fantastic. Thanks for the questions there, and some very thorough answers. Thanks for those. So just before we went to the audience questions, I was asking about how do businesses make sure we get these conversations right. Is there anything else, just on if we reverse engineer that the businesses shouldn't do? how could they get it wrong? And it may just be the reverse of what we said, but it's worth highlighting so people are really clear. So how can businesses get things wrong and what should they avoid? Alicia, what do you think?
Yeah, I think what I have seen happen in the past is a business will when it addressing kind of well-being as an initiative, they'll get occupational health or an EAP, plonk it on their intranet, and then they're like, oh, finished, and nobody knows what it is, how to access it, what it means. No conversations are happening. EAP is not for everyone, neither is occupational health. There's no authenticity or meaning or personalization behind that process. So I think it's really important to remember that it's not just about having those resources there for people. It's about how you communicate it, about how are you promoting well-being within the organization, how often are you promoting it, how do people know who to go to if they need to talk to someone, who is involved in this as well, who are you involving across the business. So all these questions you need to think about. It's not, it should never be a tick box exercise. It will never work if you take that approach. There's lots of material and information out there, and lots of podcasts and things to help people with this. So it's just worth kind of exploring, seeing what will work for you and your organization, but just remembering that it really needs to be a proactive initiative.
Yep, absolutely. Lauren, anything you think there as well?
Yeah, I think that the biggest mistake that I see companies making when it comes to dealing with these wellbeing issues is not having the conversation, and especially from a line manager point of view, so they can be very quick just to be like straight to HR, straight to Talk Health, whatever. But I think line managers have to feel empowered, they have to feel supported to be able to go and speak to their staff member and say, I've noticed that you're not 100% yourself. Do you want to come and talk about it with me? And I think they're the people who are most likely to pick up on these things, and they should be the person that the staff member feels most comfortable speaking to. So I think a little bit more support and training around there. Again, there's so many resources online about how to broach these conversations, but just getting into the kind of business mindset that these aren't HR issues, these are people issues, and if you're a people manager, that's part of your job.
100% agree, absolutely. Alicia, so could you take us through how you set up a wellbeing committee at Arbor? And also, I know we were talking about whether it was wellbeing or wellness in the notes. I've ended up with wellbeingness on my notes, which I've actually invented a word there, so I'm going to make sure I copyright that. But please, could you talk us through the committee? That'd be great.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So at Arbor, it started with looking at mental health. We had some absence, high absence because of it. And in most cases, we were able to bring the employees back, and it was brilliant. I was really pleased about that. However, I noticed that we needed to do more. And it was the right thing to do for the employees of the business, but also for the business ourselves. High absence is expensive. We don't want to lose people, and we want people to feel supported and engaged. So the first thing I did was I sent me and two others in my team on training. That was the first thing, to raise our own awareness and learn more so that we understood, what we were talking about and what language to use and things like that. So we came from an authentic place, and we did a lunch and learn, just a 20-minute lunch and learn. We did it together. We tried to make it interactive and engaging for people. We did some statistics around mental health. People were really surprised actually at how common mental health issues are. I think it's like 1 in 4 people suffer from a mental health issue. So and that generated loads of discussion and raised so much awareness. And at the end of that lunch and learn, I just said to the company, if anybody would like to get involved, please reach out. It would be wonderful, and we want to kind of do something with this and take it further and do something every month. And we got a lot of interest from different people across the organization, which was great. And we ended up coming together all to just share our ideas. And in the end, we formed a wellbeing committee. And we looked at how we could structure, what we did. And it kind of started with mental health, but actually became a much broader initiative as we look through, a calendar of annual events of different things that happen in the world and in the UK. There's so much out there. It's absolutely wonderful, around all sorts of topics. And we linked that to our social program and our benefits program as well. So how can we, link everything and unite it? And we put the meetings in every month. They happened every month, and we made sure we kept everything up to date. And what was really lovely was that we had people from different teams across the business all getting involved and all inputting their ideas and suggestions. So it was led by the employees, not from the people function. They just kind of drove it forward more than anything. I think I just kind of helped and guide along the way. But yeah, so that worked really well for us. And then to make sure people knew who we were, we actually put our logos on our emails and advertised ourselves internally as well. So if anybody wanted to come and talk to any of us about anything, they absolutely could. And as an initiative, we noticed a really big difference in engagement. And we did all this before COVID hit. And I was so proud and grateful that we'd done that, because actually when COVID hit, everybody knew who they could talk to if they needed extra support. And we had such a solid support of resources in place for people that we were so well prepared. We had meditation happening, yoga, we had story time for people's children, we had a regular stream of social events happening, we were getting talks in on financial well-being and people talking to us about LGBTQ and what that means, and all kinds of stuff going on as part of our program. And I was just so pleased that we did that and had that support for people at that time.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. And now you've been a part of that and you've seen it work so well. Do you think that is something that should just be in every business, the same way that every business should have an HR function or a sales function or whatever? Do you think it should be a piece of the furniture, or do you think it's only going to suit certain companies?
I think with this, I'm always wary of one size fits all, regardless of what the initiative is. I think you need to look at your culture, what works for your culture, your size of business, where people are located. I think those are all things you should take into consideration before kind of rolling out an initiative. What worked well for us is, lunch and learns were part of our culture anyway. At that point we were all in the office, so we could communicate very easily. Obviously things are quite different at the moment with lots of people working remotely. I think though it should be on everybody's agenda, absolutely, but how they do it I think needs to be tailored to what will work for them.
Absolutely makes sense. If anybody's got any questions about the Wellbeing Committee, just do pop them in the chat or pop your hand up. I've just got another question actually just come through on the private chat. So the question reads, what mistakes have you seen previously, if you're comfortable mentioning them, that managers and the board should avoid when it comes to well-being of employees, and how were these mistakes rectified? So I think that's coming at a slightly different angle from what I asked, which I think was how companies trying to do the right thing would do it wrong. I suppose just how do companies just do it wrong sometimes and then have to kind of come back and fix what they've done. Alicia, does that make sense? What do you think?
Yeah, I think mistakes that I've seen in the past, and I think Lauren touched on this earlier, is about line managers panicking immediately if somebody says that they're suffering in their well-being, and rather than openly talking to them about it and finding out what part of the well-being of their well-being is being compromised, what support are they looking for, they just kind of panic and shove them to HR. And in some larger organizations, I've worked in smaller organizations where HR is working with everybody, but in some bigger organizations that may not be the case. These employees might not have met anybody in HR before, they don't know who that person is, they don't feel comfortable necessarily opening up to them, and then immediately they can become disengaged, and the issue that they may have could be intensified as a result of that. So I think it's just really important that you give your managers the right tools and resources to have those conversations, and the confidence as well. They're not doctors at the end of the day, they're not there to diagnose, but they should be there to listen to people. They don't need to give a solution there and then, but they just need to understand what the employee is saying. And I think that communication is absolutely essential. Where I've seen things break and go horribly wrong is when that communication hasn't worked well.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Lauren, anything you think there as well?
Yeah, I can definitely think of a few things that I've seen senior management do over the years that has not helped the wellbeing cause. So a lot of these behaviours or examples are things that they just have never really thought about in this context. So, for example, using like air quotes when they talk about, wellbeing or working from home or things like that. And it just doesn't send the right message. I think saying that they support wellbeing initiatives and then not doing any of them themselves. So, if you've got like flexible working in place, but your managers are still in from first thing in the morning till last thing at night, it doesn't set the right message for your employees to, be able to come and go with their shifts. And back to what you mentioned, Paul, just that actual vulnerability of not always kidding on that they're 100% and they're fine and everything's dandy every day, being a little bit more human and a little bit more accepting that everyone will have good days and bad days, and that's so fine. So I think definitely being more conscious about the language that they use and then trying to lead by example.
It makes sense. Thank you very much. And Lauren, could you talk us through your approach to implementing and maintaining a strong wellbeing culture at the businesses you've worked at?
Sure. So I have been lucky enough to set up the whole wellbeing agenda for a few of the companies I've worked with previously. I would say that the first thing is finding a hook. So a reason that this is something that your business should be motivated by, that is something that makes it important. And you can look at your employee feedback, you can look at your stats, your attrition, etc. But find something that when you go to the boardroom to present this, you're not just saying, well, we need to do it because everybody else is doing it. You need something a little bit more tangible and relevant. After that, similar to Alicia's, I think you need to kind of recruit a group of people who are going to bring this to life across the business. And it's really important that these people not only, are passionate and genuinely care about this, but also that they represent different people across the business. So you've got, people in different levels of role, people in different business units, people in different job roles, so that this isn't something that, the interns are running or HR are running. It's something that really is ingrained. And then after that, I've found it really helpful to use like a monthly event focus. So for example, perhaps you are looking at sleep. So what can you do in the business to educate everyone on why sleep is so important? And then how can you activate that and give people the opportunity to maybe share like a strong bedtime routine, give them an extra hour off work to have that long lie in. Maybe people are using meditation apps or mindfulness, and start to really get that conversation going around that subject area. And then ideally you would want to measure any results or feedback you get from that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really good advice there. And I think the key word of so many of these things is authenticity, isn't it? It's just making sure that businesses really, really care about these things, as Alicia was saying earlier on around the EAP. So how do we make sure then that it truly is an authentic drive by the business? What else can the business do to make sure it is not just a tick box exercise? It's a true, we care about this, we want to make it work, and that it truly is made a priority.
I think that some of the most powerful examples of authenticity I've seen has been from senior leaders or anyone, but actually sharing their own experience of well-being or mental health issues or times where they have found things more difficult. A good example for that would be our HR director at one of my previous companies. She wrote a blog about postnatal depression, and it was the first time that we'd ever had someone in a senior position write about something that is obviously so personal and so kind of in topic. So by having people start to open up and have these conversations, I think you'll find that the silence or this kind of wall around everything wellbeing and mental health related starts to break down, and people become a lot more comfortable saying, well, actually, yeah, I've suffered from this, or I went through a hard time then. And that's a really, it's free, and it's a really accessible way for people to start to genuinely take part in this conversation.
Fantastic. And a question for you both, and I'll go to you on this first of all, Lauren. When you're looking for inspiration in terms of businesses out there who are clearly getting this really right, except for the businesses you both work for, of course, but only out there that people, you look to as kind of role models, as thinking, right, they've nailed this, any that people can go and look into as well?
I think they're obviously I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. I think if you're on LinkedIn and you're kind of reading about these things or reading any kind of people magazines, etc., there's definitely a lot of companies that are trialing different things and having success with different things. And I think these are fab places to take inspiration from. But again, I still think it comes back down to figuring out what's going to work for you. So, listening to your employees and finding out what's going to make their lives better or easier or happier. So I think it's good that you've got these sources to maybe give you ideas. But again, I wouldn't maybe just take something that someone else has done and it's worked for them and kind of implant that into your own business.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alicia, are there any companies out there that you kind of look to for inspiration sometimes, think, they've got this right, that stand out to you?
Yeah, I follow Culture Amp. and they do a lot of work around, I mean, all sorts of different topics, but they definitely do a lot around well-being, and they have a lot of really interesting blogs and podcasts and fact sheets around that. So they're worth having a look at. Charlie HR as well. So Ben Gately, CEO of Charlie HR, he does a lot of podcasts on different topics, and Charlie HR have done quite a lot on well-being in their own organisation, I know. So worth having a look at them also.
Perfect, thank you. So Alicia, financial well-being is, I was reading this morning actually, is one of the most neglected areas for business, looking after people, despite money being, you know, how often does anyone get stressed about money in some way? So it feels like an obvious one. So why do you think that is? And what can businesses really do to look after the financial well-being of its workforce?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. From my perspective, I think the reason why it kind of gets left off is because it's probably comes across as not being as obviously a contributor to mental well-being as things like your physical health and you know, and socializing with your colleagues and things like that. And I also think sometimes organizations don't know what's available out there when it comes to financial well-being or how to handle that. But there are things you can do. So you can organize talks. There are companies that offer talks to people about, you know, how to get a mortgage and you know what that means, how to handle debt. There's lots of different offerings out there if you have a look. That's quite a good thing to do, quite useful. We got good feedback when we did that. There are benefits you can have that support people financially with short-term loans, but in an ethical way. So you can have a look at that as well. So companies that do that. Hatch, VouchedFor sister company, they offer financial coaching as well, and you can have a look at them and see what they do. But yeah, if you just do some research and see what's out there, there are definitely things that you can do and offer to staff on that front as well. And I think it's just reviewing your benefits and what people want and need also. So, you know, it's not always about money when it comes to benefits, but it's, you know, it's kind of what you're offering people. So, you know, looking at your kind of well-being budget for people, are you going to give people individual budgets that they can put towards their well-being if you can afford to do that? Again, you don't need a big budget or to do that to make well-being successful, but it's just an idea for people.
Fantastic. And Lauren, what do you think around the financial well-being side?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's definitely the area of wellbeing I think is always left out. I think partly because people just still shy away from discussing anything to do with finances. You know, you don't want to say, oh well, I earn this much, but I've got this much debt, and you know, my bills are this much. People don't usually have those conversations, especially at work. But there's loads of things that you can do. One thing that I've found really helpful is partnering with like a financial advisory organization. I had Brew & Dolphin come in, and they basically did a talk on all things, you know, savings, debt, pension, mortgage, etc. And then they offered the staff one-to-one half-hour consultations afterwards to go in and to discuss their personal situation. And then they were able to signpost, you know, any other resources or things that could help them. So I think you have to definitely just, you know, partner with an expert to get that advice for your staff. A lot of employee assistance programs will have a financial advice element in there. Again, something that's just overlooked and underused. But there are structures in place, and one company, I think it's called Nudge, you know, you'll find them online. They do a lot of stuff that's specifically to do with financial well-being.
Perfect, thank you. And Lauren, another topic at the moment around things well-being is quite a few businesses are offering Wellbeing Days to their staff, which sounds like a really good thing. Do you think we're going to get to a point where this is a compulsory thing that businesses need to offer? And also, how do you think they should be implemented and used?
Yeah, I think it's a really nice idea. And I think especially over the last year, people have shied away from taking annual leave and taking some time off to look after themselves. So I think Wellbeing Days have kind of counteracted that. Something that I've done previously is had Wellbeing Wednesdays. And this is basically a day where you don't have a lot of meetings, and it's more about, you know, getting on top of your emails, getting on top of your workload, giving yourself a bit of headspace for any, you know, learning and development. So that works really well. But I think more so, I think that we need to try and have well-being as something that we are always looking after and that we always have as a priority, as opposed to companies maybe just creating like one day a month where people are meant to really focus on it. So I think it's great, but I think it could be more integrated.
Yeah, understood. What do you think, Alicia, on Wellbeing Days?
Yeah, I agree with Lauren. I think you could give everyone in the company a day off for well-being, but you could still not succeed at having a good, strong wellbeing agenda or initiative. I think you really it needs to be part of a much wider, broader spectrum of offerings and resources and support and training and L&D and everything that encompasses the people function and what they can do for people. So yeah, I think it's a lovely idea, and I think if used in the right way and communicated in the right way, it would be great. So I'd be fully supportive of it, but I think it's just how you communicate it and what is it part of. As Lauren said, we also at Arbor, we used to do kind of Wellbeing Wednesdays and have our etc. On those days, and encourage people to have breaks from Zoom. We used to have hours where they went, they should be off their screens, etc. So yeah, just trying to encourage people to take that break, especially during lockdown, and not get Zoom fatigue or death by Zoom.
Absolutely. And if we've talked about quite a few resources and companies and inspirations out there, well, what are some other key resources that you Alicia, would guide people to so they can start tracking, supporting and improving the well-being of their workforce? What's the right stuff for people to go to?
Yeah, so before talking about like specific places they can go to, I think the first thing you need to do, if you want to set up a successful wellbeing agenda, is you really need to have a plan and a long-term strategy of what do you want to achieve and how are you going to get there. And you really need to have that, because otherwise it could just flop off the agenda, or you could forget about it, or you might not be as successful as you'd hoped you would be. So I think it's really important to have your vision. What do you want to achieve? What are the things you're going to do to get there? How long of a time period is that going to be? And how often are you going to communicate that to the rest of the business? You need to have accountability. Who is owning that initiative and driving it forward and communicating it. So that's really important. I think in terms of organizations or areas that you could go to for help and advice and support, there is a wealth of material out there. LinkedIn has stuff all the time. There's loads of webinars and podcasts and blogs and all kinds of ideas and meetups. And I've said quite a few of them already, but yeah, have a look at Culture Amp and what some of the stuff that they do and offer. They do free workshops on various topics as well. They did one on resilience I went to last year, which was really great, giving and receiving feedback, all these things that can help develop people in their intellectual well-being, but also their social well-being as well. Have a look at the podcast from Charlie HR. They're absolutely brilliant. Mind is a gold mine of resources. They have absolutely brilliant worksheets and fact sheets on there, and brilliant support for employers when it comes to supporting wellbeing in the workplace. So definitely have a look at that as well.
Perfect. And what do you think, Lauren?
If there was, obviously all those are great and definitely use them, but I think if there was one thing that you wanted to use to like activate the wellbeing conversation in your workplace, I would highly recommend a chap called David Beanie. He runs a company called Breaking the Silence. I adore David. I've heard him speak multiple times, and basically he'll come into your company and he'll do a talk and he'll tell you about his journey of mental health and wellbeing, and he will basically set the tone for how everyone in the company can now think about this, can now speak about this, and it's just such a great way to really just bring this conversation to life. He also does training for line managers and senior management on how to embed this in your culture. So if you've only got a couple £100 to spend on your wellbeing thing, go and book David Beanie. I promise you won't regret it.
It's funny you should say that. So as part of our mental health awareness week, we had David do a talk for us yesterday, and it went down really, really well. He was a top guy, and I'm hoping to get him on here sometime as well. So I also endorse David Beanie. It's good advice. Corporate giants perhaps have some advantages in terms of budgets for this type of thing. So if budgets are an issue, and you perhaps have a business of a smaller scale and a smaller budget, Lauren, what advice would you give businesses to create this wellbeing priority culture without breaking the bank?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies are starting from absolutely no budget for these things because they're not really they're not signed off to have a tangible business benefit. Obviously they do, but that's not something that people necessarily throw money at. So I think you have to be creative. There are a lot of wellbeing activities that I've run that just require absolutely, no financial input. So things like random acts of kindness. This is one that we ran where everybody over the course of the week was challenged to do a random act of kindness for one of their colleagues. That doesn't cost anything. Maybe if you buy someone a cup of coffee. We did walking month. So everybody was challenged to, get their step count up each day, and you just stick that on a spreadsheet and you have kind of prizes and competitions. Again, totally free. There's resources like, mindfulness, yoga with AJ on YouTube, free yoga classes, TED Talks and all these subjects. So I think it's just a case of, just don't let that put you off. It's so fine. I think most of us that have done this wellbeing agenda for companies definitely started with no budget for it. So yeah, just try and figure out ways that you can maybe be a bit more creative and a bit more fun with it.
If you don't mind me asking, what kind of nice things did people do for each other when you ran that?
It was honestly lovely. So we had like wee post-it notes on people's desks with compliments or recognition for their hard work or something they really liked about them. We had loads of people bringing in surprise lunches or cakes or donuts. We had people just inviting others to go for a walk with them at lunchtime, maybe people that were new or hadn't loads of friends at work. It was a nice thing to do.
That sounds lovely. Alicia, what about yourself?
Yeah, so like Lauren, we started with nothing as well, just a lot of optimism and energy, and it is just about getting creative. And we did similar things as well. So we also did Random Acts of Kindness Day. We also did a day of thanks where everybody in the organisation thanked someone in the company for something, and that just was a lovely day. I just finished that day of work with a huge smile on my face, with my heart kind of beaming, because it was just really warming to see all the thanks that was there that nobody would have said otherwise if we hadn't done that. So yeah, there are lots of little things that you can do that are absolutely free. You just have to be creative about it. And I think one of the things to think about is it doesn't just have to be on you to organize all of this. Ask other people. People are so creative, and most organizations have a wealth of talent and skills, and people have so many different things that they can offer. We had people playing music to us. We had somebody who, I think I mentioned before, read stories for people's children. We had someone who did an art class. It's amazing to see what people actually have to offer when you ask them and get other people involved. So do ask them, and I'm sure you'll be surprised about what comes back.
It's lovely. Really, really like that. Look, I think we've covered so much. We've given so much advice. I think there's been loads of takeaways on here. I suppose just to finish up, really, one question for you both. If you are a business and it's probably recapping some of what we talked about. If you are just thinking, right, I need to make this a priority in my company, I've not done anything like, around it before. What's the starting point? What's that first step, Alicia? What do you think is the most important thing?
I think there are two things. I think one, you need to put together your, vision about what you want to achieve and why, because ultimately you're going to have to get support from the senior leadership team. So what impact does this have on the business? There is so much information and statistics out there about the positive impact that looking after well-being has on a business, when it comes to engagement levels, motivation, your employer brand, retention, absence. There are so many things that it has a positive impact on your business, as well as being the right thing to do, obviously. And then the second thing is upskill yourself. Take time to learn yourself about what tools and resources are available out there. And, whether that's just reading about it for 20 minutes a day, or listening to a podcast when you're on your way to the tube, or, when we're commuting again, or whatever that is. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to send yourself on a really expensive training course, but you should take the time to upskill yourself on it, because it's worth it. There's so much to learn on the topic.
Fantastic. And Lauren, for you, I suppose final question, what's the starting point for business who does now want to make this a priority for their workforce?
Yeah, I think go and see what you've already got. I think a lot of people will be surprised if you've got an employee assistance program in place. They will somewhere on that website have a calendar, a wellbeing calendar of events, resources, all your days, all the kind of links to activities that you can do, all the manager support. There will be something there that you can just start as a kind of jumping off point. And secondly, to Alicia's point, don't feel like you have to do this all by yourself. You don't now have to become a clinical psychologist. You don't have to be a one-man band shouting about wellbeing. Find other people in your company who are passionate and who want to be involved, and then let them be involved, because it's the best way for you to deal with it, and it's the best way for the company to have it really embedded properly.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you both so much. I know how busy you are, so thank you so much for being involved and to give us such good advice. Lauren, what's the best way, if anyone wants to reach out to you after this, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, just get me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to take any questions, share any resources, and help in any way I can.
Fantastic. And Alicia, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Exactly the same, LinkedIn.
Perfect. All right, great. Well, look, thanks to the audience for watching today, and thanks to everyone listening to on the podcast. Next week, we will be hosting a business called Spill, who will be talking us through a data-driven approach to happiness. So I'm sure we could all use a bit of that. So thanks very much again to the speakers. Thanks everyone for attending, and I'll see you all next week.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.